The year is 1996. Capcom has just released their all-new survival horror title, Resident Evil, a game that manages to impress horror fans and critics alike. The company's rival, Konami, saw an opportunity to cash in on the new phenomenon with a horror title of their own. But despite their eagerness to throw their hat in the ring, Konami was still skeptical and expected low returns from the project. So instead of gathering an A-list team of their best employees, they instead gathered a team of their rejects and burnouts. Employees that had failed at other projects, or that were incompatible with the teams they had been placed on previously. And it was this unlikely scenario that resulted in the creation of a game that would go on to define survival horror for generations to come. This is the story of Silent Hill.
Cheryl's my little girl. I can't just leave her out there by herself.
People said it was a curse, a living nightmare.
Was I dreaming?
Part 1. Team Silent. When development on Silent Hill began, the team of underdog developers had no idea what to do with the project. And before long, the executives at Konami ended up losing faith in the project altogether, preemptively writing it off as an experimental waste of time, leaving the team with less oversight and micromanagement than ever before. This newfound freedom actually ended up giving the team just enough room to create something more abstract, bizarre, and strange than they originally planned. The developers managed to create a game that would appeal to both the emotions and inner subconscious of the players, giving the game a true sense of psychological horror. Throughout the game, you make your way through the map solving puzzles, fighting monsters, and meeting the occasional townsfolk cult member along the way, all the while navigating this foggy limbo world that's constantly shifting into a violent hellscape, almost seemingly at random. Instead of just filling the halls with gratuitous amounts of blood, gore, and jump scares, Silent Hill makes you fear the unknown by creating an atmosphere of dread and suspense that builds and builds over time until it ultimately climaxes in a feeling of pure terror. It's a tension that constantly rises and falls, often leaving players stranded with no clear direction or purposefully making the player run in a series of seemingly infinite loops. The game does all of this purposefully to confuse and disorient you, because the game wants you to feel as trapped and confused as the character you're playing on screen. The game accomplishes its level of psychological horror by laying down dense layers of fog so that you can barely see what's in front of you.
What's going on with that radio?
As you play the game, it lets you know when there are monsters nearby by playing static on your radio that progressively gets louder and louder the closer to monsters you get. But unfortunately, the game's old school tank controls are definitely a bit dated, and the game is really starting to show its age. Maybe it's nostalgia on my part, but I think the fact that the controls kinda suck makes the game all that more scary, because it's just another layer of control that's removed from the player, and it's just one more thing in the way between you and your character's safety. One more thing between you and Silent Hill. It was in this first game that Team Silent would craft the iconic atmospheres of fear, isolation, and utter terror that would end up defining the Silent Hill series for years to come. Part 2. It was decided early on in the game's development cycle that Silent Hill would be a Japanese take on American-style horror, taking inspiration from the likes of David Lynch and Stephen King, while also borrowing major influences from certain psychological horror films like Jacob's Ladder. Much like the works of David Lynch, key parts of the narrative are often hidden in the details of the world around you, rather than being told to you outright. There are a lot of things that won't make sense until subsequent playthroughs of the game, which I think really adds to the game's replayability. And very similarly to Jacob's Ladder, the world often contorts into a hellish imitation of what it was before, shifting from the fog world into the other world. It's in these parts of the games that you'll find a bloody hellscape, trapped in an eternal night filled with stronger creatures lurking in the shadows, ready to bounce up on you. It's here in these parts of the games that the world of Silent Hill starts to take on a life of its own, and it's here that you start to understand that the world is somewhat sentient. In later games, the town even takes on the subconscious fears of the guilty and personifies them into the town itself. But in this game, things are just a little bit different. Here, all of the monsters are manifested from the memories and nightmares of a girl named Alessa Gillespie, but we'll get into more about her later. Part 3. The Story. On the surface, Silent Hill is a peaceful vacation town, but underneath the surface, it's much more sinister. The town is run by a cult, and the cult has one goal: to birth their god into our world in hopes of ushering in an eternal paradise alongside him. But throughout the game, we start to find out that this isn't a god that's going to usher in eternal paradise, it's actually a demon that's going to usher in the apocalypse. The cult is led by Dahlia Gillespie, and her daughter, Alessa Gillespie, was born with psychic powers, and because of that, she was chosen by the cult to be the mother of the new god, meaning that Alessa would be forced to become impregnated with the seed of their god, and then give birth to it, ushering in the infernal paradise foreseen in the cult's prophecy.
Send me a teeny bit of your power. No, I don't want to do it. It will make everyone happy, and it's for your own good, too. Oh, but Mommy, I just want to be with you.
And she fought against her mother and the cult to try and get away from it. But with no means of escape, in an act of desperation, Alessa lost control of her powers completely. She accidentally used her psychic abilities to make the house's boiler explode, catching the house on fire, burning her alive inside. After this, her body is left scarred and nearly dead, but the cult ends up using black magic to keep her alive in hopes of still performing the ritual on her again when she's healed. Realizing the cult's not going to give up so easily, Alessa fights back against her unending pain, and she uses her abilities to split her soul into 2 parts. This causes her to fall into a coma and makes the ritual impossible to complete.
Half the soul is lost. That is why the seed lies dormant.
And what soul remains captured in that husk is buried deep down in the subconscious.
Meanwhile, far, far, far away from the town, a young writer named Harry and his wife find an abandoned baby on the side of the road.
But, you know, Cheryl isn't my biological daughter. I actually haven't told her yet. She probably already knows anyway, though. We found her abandoned on the side of the highway. Nobody knew where she came from. We didn't have any kids of our own. My wife was sick, and it didn't look like she was getting any better. So we took Cheryl in.
So in that case...
There might be some connection between Cheryl and this town.
They name the newfound baby Cheryl and decide to raise it as their own. Sometime later, Harry's wife ends up getting sick and dies. Meanwhile, in Silent Hill, the cult begins performing rituals on Alessa, hoping that they can summon the other half of her soul back to the town.
Unless we get the other half of the soul.
We'll use a magical spell. Feeling this child's pain, it's sure to come.
And unfortunately for Harry, this plan ends up succeeding, when Cheryl asks her father if they can visit the resort town of Silent Hill for vacation. While entering the town of Silent Hill, Harry is passed by a police officer, only to moments later notice the officer's bike on the side of the road, just before seeing a young girl in the middle of the road, causing him to swerve off the road and crash his car. Harry wakes up sometime later, only to find his daughter missing, with only her sketch pad left behind. Harry later wakes up in a diner and ends up meeting the cop from the scene before, and she helps Harry get up to speed.
Where is everybody?
I'd tell you if I knew, believe me. But from what I can tell, something bizarre's going on.
And the two split up to investigate the town further.
I want to know what's going on here. What is with this town?
This may sound really off the wall, but listen to me. I haven't gone crazy and I'm not fooling around. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. But now I know I'm not. It's not me. This whole town. It's being invaded by the other world. By a world of someone's nightmarish delusions come to life. Little by little, the invasion is spreading, trying to swallow up everything in darkness.
Well, what's making this happen?
I don't know that either, but I do know Cheryl is there. Under whoever created this darkness, Cheryl is somewhere and she needs my help.
So Harry ends up making his way across town, fighting monsters and solving weird puzzles along the way. Eventually, some of the clues he's found point him towards the Balkan Church, and it's there that he meets Alessa's mother, Dahlia Gillespie.
I knew you'd come. You want the girl, right?
The girl? You're talking about Cheryl.
I see everything.
You know something. Tell me.
Stay back. Nothing is to be gained from floundering about at random. Here, the flowers, a cage of peace. It can break through the walls of darkness and counteract the wrath of the underworld. These will help you. Make haste to the hospital before it's too late.
Over the course of the game, Dahlia manipulates Harry over and over again into helping the cult. But eventually he uncovers the truth and ends up setting his sights on freeing his daughter from their grasp and finally escaping the nightmarish hellhole of Silent Hill. I'm going to take a break from the story for a second to talk about something that's a little bit different but still related. A lot of the horror in Silent Hill comes from simulation of real-world trauma. The game doesn't just scare you because a random bloody monster jumps out at you. It scares you because it reminds you of your own fragile mortality. It scares you because it reminds you of the darkest parts of everyday life. And in that same vein, I find one of the subplots in the game to be eerily similar to the current US opioid crisis. Throughout the letters and news articles you find hidden around town, you learn that the cult of Silent Hill has been pushing an addictive drug called White Claudia to all the townspeople through the hospital and the town's doctor, Michael Kauffman. Even though the game just slightly touches on the ramifications of the drug ring, we can feel the impact of it most through one of the game's side characters, Dr. Kaufman's nurse, Lisa Garland.
What is it? Still has an unusually high fever. Eyes don't open. Getting a pulse, but just barely breathing. Why? What is keeping that child alive? I can't stand it any longer. I won't tell a soul. Promise. So please.
After Alessa was burned, the cult hid her in the basement, and Lisa was the nurse that attended to her there. Throughout the game, she's usually portrayed as one of the few redeemable characters, mainly wanting to help Harry instead of impeding his progress or manipulate him, like the rest of the town. It's not until later on in the game that we find out the hold that Dr. Kaufman has over Lisa due to her addiction. It's the addiction that keeps Lisa complicit in the cult's activities, even though she has a guilty conscience. The arc of Lisa's addiction ends up culminating in one of the most emotionally impactful scenes of the whole story. A scene where we come to understand that some of the monsters in Silent Hill may not be exactly what they seem.
Harry,
Lisa, what's the matter with you?
I get it now. Why I'm still alive even though everyone else is dead. I'm not the only one who's still walking around. I'm the same as them. I just hadn't noticed it before.
Lisa.
Stay by me, Harry. Please. I'm so scared. Help me. Save me from them. Please. Harry.
many of the beings that we perceive as monsters may be the victims of some greater evil themselves, which seems to serve as a direct parallel to the victims of the opioid crisis in America today.
An epidemic. In fact, it's called the worst public health epidemic in our history.
This undercover video of Kermit's main pharmacy shows scores of people picking up prescriptions inside and at the drive-through window.
4 out of 5 new heroin users started by misusing prescription painkillers.
More than 3 million doses of hydrocodone were ordered by a Kermit pharmacist, James Woolley, in 1 year.
Purdue Pharmaceuticals, the makers of OxyContin, which is owned by the Sackler family, seen here not giving a The Sacklers and Purdue have faced hundreds of lawsuits, including one right now by the state of Colorado, which alleges that Purdue Pharma downplayed the risk of addiction associated with opioids, exaggerated the benefits, and advised healthcare professionals that they were violating their Hippocratic oath and failing their patients unless they treated pain symptoms with opioids.
I'm just looking out for myself. Everyone does it. Don't stand there looking so smug. You're the worst person in this room. You come here and enjoy spilling their blood and listening to them cry out. You feel excited when you step on them and snuff out their lives.
Are you talking about the monsters?
Monsters? They look like monsters to you?
Oh no.
Don't worry. It's just a joke.
But moving away from that and getting back to the story, it's also through that subplot that we're introduced to another substance that's crucial to the story, aglaophatis. Aglaophatis is a red liquid, and it's said that it has the ability to dispel demonic forces as well as protect the users against those demonic forces. This red liquid ends up being Dr. Kauffman's key weapon against the cult. In order to get the good ending, obtaining the aglaophatis is vital. This stuff is so important that it even ends up showing up again in Silent Hill 3, where it's just as important to that game's ending as it is to this one. By the time you reach the end of the game, the cult has re-merged Alessa and Cheryl into one being, and the cult has already begun the process of rebirthing their demon god into the world through Alessa. In a shocking twist, Kauffman turns against Dahlia, throwing a vial of aglaophatis onto Alessa, resulting in the birth of a pre-born, weakened version of their demon god. After Harry aborts the corrupted demon, a dying Alessa presents him with a newborn baby, and then slowly fades away. Right after that, the otherworld monster version of Lisa grabs a hold of Dr. Kauffman, dragging him away into the otherworld to suffer the same fate as Dahlia and the rest of the cult. Amidst all the chaos, Harry flees the town with the newborn baby, just narrowly escaping with his life. It's not until Silent Hill 3 that we find out more details about what happened to Harry and the newborn baby, as well as what exactly happened to Alessa. But you know what? I think that's a story for another day. Silent Hill ended up being a resounding success. It ended up being loved by horror fans and critics alike. And the success of that first game for PlayStation ended up in a long-running franchise that's still loved by fans to this very day. And after the success of the other games, Silent Hill even went on to become a multimedia franchise, spanning across everything from movies to comics to arcade machines and even pachinko machines, I guess. Whatever those are. Silent Hill left a blood-stained mark on gaming culture, and that influence still lingers to this day. And it all started with a team of rejects and a company who didn't believe in them. Thanks for sticking around till the end. First and foremost, happy Halloween. This is my absolute favorite time of the year every year, and it makes me so happy to share it with you. Because of the holiday, I wanted to make something that was a little more from the heart Something a little darker and more personal than my usual content. Kinda like my Dead Man video last Halloween. I promise next week's video won't be such a downer. It's actually a lot more upbeat. It'll be about Twilight, and focusing on some of the weirder aspects of its lore. I promise that whether you hate Twilight or love it, this video will have something for you, I'm sure. And before I go, I'd like to thank Anganoff for providing the animation in this video. You can check out a video we worked on together called Stoner Venom here, or in the description down below. Either way, don't forget to subscribe to both of our channels, and then like the video if you enjoyed it. And if you want to talk about some of the things I brought up in the video, then I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments down below. And if you'd like to further support the channel, you can check out the links to our Ko-fi, Patreon, and Amazon wishlist in the description. Thanks for watching again, everyone. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Let me ask you, have you seen a little girl around here? Short, black hair?